Welcome back to the Profit Boss podcast. Thanks for jumping in and listening to me today. I am back with part 2 of the episode all about profits. It wouldn't be the Profit Boss without covering this topic in full and in detail. Part 1, if you've listened, great. Let's keep going. If you haven't, I would encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 because I covered in that episode everything about what is profit, where to go find profit for your business, and also the most important one is why profit matters. Basically, if you want to build a business that is sustainable and returns to you what you deserve for all your hard work and creativity, then this is the episode for you. In this part 2, I'm going to be covering what should my profit be for my business, how to improve your profit, and also forecasting your profit if you're a new business owner. Plus, stay tuned to the end because I have a bit of a bonus thing I'd like to cover, all about when you're a new business owner and what to do with that profit if you want to be best practice in business. Now, you know from part 1 what profit is, and it then leads to the question, well, what should profit be for my business? And this is going to be super unique for each individual person. A business can start as a side hustle, which means that if you don't necessarily rely on the income from that side hustle to cover your personal bills, your rent, your holiday savings, because you've got a full-time job or a part-time job outside your business, then what you need your profit to be is going to look quite different to someone who completely relies on their business as their sole source of income. So I just want to highlight that each business will be super unique in what profit they'll need. And this really goes back to the fact of what profit is because it's yours. It's your return. So I'd say we need to start there. Start at the bottom line and work out what you need that to be and work backwards. Let's say you need $1,000 a week from your business. We spoke about in part 1 how profit was a before tax figure. We then need to work backwards to say, well, we need to gross up that profit before tax to then be left with $1,000 after tax. And as you may recall from part 1, I spoke about a very general rule of thumb tax savings rate of 30%. And lucky for you, speaking on this $1,000 a week figure for your personal budget needs, I have done some calculations to work out what that gross profit would be if we're going to put 30% aside for tax. That will be $1,430 a week. So then if you take 30% away, you're left with 70%, and that's your $1,000 a week of profit after tax for yourself. So now we have $1,430 a week that we know we need in profit from our business to give ourselves the return that we need. So to get to that $1,430 a week, we need to work backwards of, well, what expenses do we know we will have in that week for the business, which will then provide us with a sales figure that we'll need for the week. So let's say our expenses are $1,000, then we know we need to make not only the $1,430, but we also need to make the $1,000 back to cover our expenses, leaving us with a sales target of $2,430. And I use this as an example to show you how that is where you can come up with a profit target for your business. And you then have 2 levers. You have your sales and your expenses that translate to that profit. Another way of thinking about what your profit should be for your business is thinking about what you would at least be paid if you were doing a similar role but in an employee capacity. And this is especially important for those full-time business owners. You really do want to build a business that you feel rewarded from. Otherwise, it's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to resentment. You're going to feel like all your hard work isn't paying off. So that's another way of picking a profit target in your business. Now, one other factor I like to highlight in terms of coming up with that figure, as we spoke about, we had the example of needing $1,000 a week in profit left over. I would just caution that if your business, so the business itself, has any debt. So you may have taken a loan out to start the business. You might have a car loan for the business. You might have some prior period tax debts that you're paying off. If your business has debt, you will actually need to make more profit because that money is required on top of your $1,000 a week to be able to meet the cash flow requirements of paying off those loans. The next thing I wanted to cover was the really fun side, how to improve your profit. And I like to think of this one as where the numbers meet your strategy in business. And truthfully, when you're starting out, there is an element of trial and error in terms of creating more profits in your business. And again, it's made up of two levers. So it's not always going to be about finding more sales because sometimes you can't do that without also increasing your expenses. And it's not also going to be about just throwing money at things and hoping they stick and hoping it translates to sales. You do need to be intentional about where you're spending that money so that you know that your strategy is that that money is being spent to provide a return in form of extra sales. And I know that this is the accountant speaking, but truthfully, to improve your profit, you do have to start monitoring it and measuring it. And I really think that this goes back to the saying that you cannot manage or improve something unless you measure it. So let's say we've looked at the figures and we've done it consistently and we're starting to see the story of where the peaks and troughs are in sales and expenses for our business. I want you to consider things like, is there months in which sales were low that I could have proactively improved my actions, which would have slightly changed what I would have received in sales? Or consider, were there any services or products that I sold at a loss where it actually didn't make money, it cost me money to sell it? And how can I implement better systems and efficiencies and operations to stop that happening again in the future? Obviously, you can also just consider, is there anything I can completely remove as an expense? Or maybe not so drastic, is there anything I can reduce as an expense? And is there anywhere in that story that's showing that where you've spent money, it's directly correlated to a boost in sales? And if so, can we invest more there in the terms of expenditure to only further boost our sales? One easy example is ad spend. If you've seen a great success in consistently investing in Facebook ads because you're a product-based e-commerce business, you know, if we spend more, if we increase our spend by $10 a day, what does that then translate to in sales? And that's where I sort of like to think of strategy in terms of profit as creative ways to increase sales without also mitigating that with the same increase in expenses. I personally work with a lot of people in the allied health space, and when I speak to them about profit and growing their profit, we often talk about people as a resource. And so their staffing is something that they spend money on. And we have this conversation of comparing which staff is going to provide the best return on a boost in profit. And the easy way to compare that would be hiring someone to support the business owner from an administration perspective. And what that could translate to in figures is that the business owner, assuming that they're a qualified allied health professional, maybe they're an OT, maybe they're an EP, physio, I work with lots of people in that space. And so if they've got more hours back in their day because they're not invoicing, they're not answering the phone, they're not scheduling their calendar to do productive billable work as their professional allows them to do, as their profession allows them to do, then will that provide a bigger boost in profit than them, by comparison, hiring another allied health professional? So the admin person's going to be cheaper than hiring, say, another OT if it's an OT business. But if they hire a full-time OT, that person is going to provide a whole week's worth of billable hours from day one, charge out to clients. Like, that's a significant boost in sales because you're providing a whole nother person who has capacity to do your full-time job as well. So we often look at the different lever you can pull, and ultimately that decision, like on paper, the second option of having a full-time allied health professional would provide a higher profit, but it doesn't mitigate the fact that the owner's still doing admin. So I think it ultimately comes down to the owner's decision of where they'd prefer to spend their time. Some are happy to do a 50-50 mix and do a bit of admin to supplement their also client work or clinical work. But others are like, no, get me back with my patients. Let's get that admin person in. So I think that is a really tangible example of how different decisions can then translate to different results in terms of profit. And just to wrap up on that question of how do you improve your profit, I think one of the best things you can do as a business owner is give yourself time to think about your business strategy. This doesn't have to be something you do every single week or every single month, but I think at least quarterly, like sitting down and giving yourself time and not time blocking it. Don't give yourself only an hour because this is a creative time, so you don't want to cut yourself short if you're in the flow and really going along with that brainstorming is working really well. But sit down, look at what your profits have been, think about what you want them to be, think about what's working and if you can do more of it, and think about what's not working and how you can put processes, systems, plans in place to stop those things that aren't working. And think about your strategy in business, where you want your business to go. If I was doing this, I would use like a whiteboard and just literally brain dump in a big bubble about your business. And everyone's going to work differently. This might be sticky notes. This might be fully on your phone. This might be voice notes. And so think about your strategy, and then this coupled with intentional action following that planning step of intentional steps of what you're going to do to implement that strategy will translate to improved figures, I promise. And the next one is all about small business owners who are new to this landscape. So if you've never had a business before or you haven't had a business in the industry, product or service that you're now starting, so it's something, one element of it is all new, then knowing what your profit will be or forecasting this or working out how to improve this can be quite daunting. And so in this case, you don't have historical figures to work off to make decisions about what that's going to look like realistically. And I think that's where it comes down to having a bit of a plan, doing some research about what your competitors are charging so you can work out a rough sales target or a rough sales figure, and also just going with your intuition and knowing that if you intentionally put action in the places that you want to go, the rest will flow. Something I can help businesses with who are new is preparing a 12-month budget or forecast. And the reason that might help is because all day, every day, I'm looking at profit and loss statements. I have a pretty good idea of what different things cost in business for different industries. So I would have a rough idea of what ads would cost, a rough idea of cost of goods sold, subscriptions, telephone, rent, motor vehicle, you name it, like all those figures. I could probably tell you what a business would pay for that per year, per staff member, per fleet of car. Like I am across the sort of figures that different businesses incur. And this just helps provide a starting point to make decisions in terms of how you're then going to cover these costs by making the sales and what sort of profit you could expect reasonably to begin with, and what that then translates to for you to be able to pay yourself. In the show notes, you'll also see that I actually have a whole workbook called a Profit Power Hour for this purpose. So you can break down exactly what you would need as a new business owner, whether that be X amount of clients per week, X amount of sales for your event, X amount of hours worked at X charge out rate if you're a tradie, for example, or an allied health professional. You know, a lot of industries work on this hourly rate model. And so in the example in the workbook, I use a dog grooming business. And so it's broken down into how many dogs that need to be groomed in the week to be able to make enough sales, to cover the expenses, to pay the tax, to then pay the owner. And it's done in a ways that you could apply any of the different business models that exist and apply it to your business and work out those figures for your business. As a little wrap up to this Profit Part 1 and Part 2 series, I do just want to highlight something that I do strongly recommend in terms of what you do with your profit initially in business. I have too often seen where a business owner will take every single dollar of that profit, or they'll take more than that profit out of the business, leaving the business to be in a position where they are somewhat struggling to cover their own expenses and or pay its own taxes. And this really creates a cash flow burden that I see creates a lot of stress for my clients if they find themselves in this situation. And it really can be mitigated by starting the business and just living off the profit that's left over and or less than that profit, so that you have money left over to put back into the business to see it grow, succeed and scale. So this isn't a long-term way of running a business. It is in those initial stages, it's temporary. And by setting it up for success from the start and building those habits of not taking every dollar out from the start, you really are putting yourself in the best position to have a sustainable business in the long term. And I think it's really easy to see why that happens. I think, we are often surrounded by consumption media and, lifestyle creep happens. It happens to me, it happens to the best of us. I think the best thing we can do though is, learn to sort of live off a little bit less to begin with, so that we're not creating that stress of wondering about, one, how are we going to put more money into the business to be able to make it grow when we actually haven't got that money left over because it's all been taken out of the business. Or worse, we don't have the money to pay the taxes because it hasn't, been intentionally put aside from the start. So if you're serious about creating the business that you're dreaming of, don't take every single dollar out of the business. And that is all of my bits and bobs about profits. If you ever have any questions about this and want to know how this might apply to you and your business and your life, please feel free to ask me. My DMs are open, emails, phone calls. If you're an existing client, just reach out to me. If you'd like to also get in touch about how I could help you directly as an accountant and advisor, I will have my complimentary new client booking link in the show notes. And as I said, I've got that workbook there. So have a look over it, spend some time looking at it as it applies to your business. And also just let me know how you go with that. Putting some time aside to look at your numbers will be super beneficial in the long run.